adapt. You're always going to be changing your business. So the lessons of 2020, the lessons of COVID-19, the lessons of effects, the adapt, and pivot, not pivot, but adapt and adopt, you should completely keep going with you in the future. If you get forced to pivot sometime in the future, good luck on that. It's a big deal.
Welcome to the Golden Group Neo Marketing Podcast, a bi-weekly discussion of best practices, latest trends, and modern techniques for professional business communication, including advertising, marketing, digital channels, social media, public relations, and alternative options.
Professor Pritchard, how are you today?
I'm doing great, Kyle. Yourself?
Fantastic. Good to see you.
Better to be seen than viewed.
That's exactly what Pritch tells me on a regular basis, folks. And listen to him. He knows what he's talking about. That's why we call him the Professor, as I make noise dragging stuff around here on the table. Welcome, everyone. Today, we're going to talk about post-COVID-19 business. So for the last year, over a year now, we have been doing what we call the Adapt, Adopt, and Pivot series. We've been talking to businesses about how to react to the limitations, the restrictions, and the otherwise can't do business normal scenario that we've been in over the last year because of COVID-19.
Right.
And this is not a medical issue. This is business. We've been trying to keep businesses alive and viable, employees employed, etc. People could pay their bills for the last year by providing advice on this podcast. And we've done so many episodes. We actually have a playlist, and you can find our playlist on YouTube and on our linked tree on all of our social media are all the audio and video playlist of COVID-19 specific episodes that, again, we're talking about the concept of adapt, adopt, or pivot, the changes that businesses were forced into, whether they like it or not. It happened in 2020 and the first part of 2021 here in response to COVID-19.
But it's going away.
That's right.
The pandemic's going away.
We're moving away from it.
We can get back to business as usual.
So I'm telling you now, this is the last episode. This will be the last episode on those playlists I just referenced, outside of something crazy happens. And please, Lord, don't let that happen to us. So we're going to talk today about how to take the ideas, take what you've put into play over the last year, and move forward from today on.
But can't we just turn the key and go back to normal?
No, you cannot go backwards in business.
Okay.
Going backwards is failure.
Well, you're going to have to help me understand that.
Okay, let's start real easy with, we've said this on that podcast before, we're going to start the conversation again. There's no such thing as a new, unquote, normal, unquote.
Normal is normal.
Normal is normal. There is no new normal, and every single day is new. So tomorrow will be different than today. That will be the new day. It will be normal, but it's not a new normal. There's no sort of idea.
It's different than it was a year ago.
It's always different.
Yes.
It's also different from 1920 or 1980 or
That's
1541.
True enough.
Right? So stop thinking and talking about a new normal. Just focus on every new day and how to move your organization forward. Like I said, if you're moving backwards, you're in trouble. How to move your organization forward with the lessons, the tools, the adaptations. Even if you pivoted in 2020 because of COVID, you need to move forward with all of that. Because at the end of the day, change is an opportunity.
Right.
One more time. I'm going to say it again because it's
important.
important.
Forced or otherwise.
Change is an opportunity.
Absolutely.
Success comes from successful management of change.
Bam.
2 nuggets for you real quick. That's the key. Change is an opportunity. Management of that change is the opportunity to be successful.
So it sounds like that might be on the quiz later.
It could be, but ultimately, this is why all of the change that's happened over this last year can benefit you moving forward if you manage that change well.
Right.
That's what we're going to talk about today, how to do that. So we've been talking about adapt, adopt, and pivot, how you move forward with it. You can't go backwards, but you also need to be continually growing your business.
Right.
Businesses that aren't growing become stagnant. Stagnant businesses ultimately fail. So growth, even small, incremental growth, with looking forward to the future is absolutely essential to operating and ultimately being successful in business. So we're going to take the lessons of the last year. They were hard. They sucked. They weren't great. But we're going to pull the nuggets out of it and move forward in a better way. We're going to continue to grow our organizations. So with that, because I lost my place in my notes.
Well, I had a chicken nugget joke in there someplace, but no.
No, don't do
Sorry, keep going.
So adapt, up, and pivot. This year, your businesses, you have adapted new processes. You've added things to the way you were doing them. You've adopted completely new styles of doing businesses, new technology, new processes, new training for your staff, new attitudes. You've adopted those things. And then potentially your business has pivoted in the last year. Now, typically, we would never tell someone to pivot in a very short time frame.
Right.
A pivot's a big deal.
Yep.
It's very expensive. And it needs to, all of your other options need to be worked out before you pivot a business. But if you get to that point, it's important to pivot and pivot well.
Well, and you pointed out in a couple of podcasts that COVID forced the quick pivot.
Absolutely. So again, typically you wouldn't have pivoted in a short time, in a quarter.
Right.
You wouldn't say this isn't working, let's pivot, because that would be panic. But there was a lot of that was forced on everyone last year.
Yep.
A lot of people now want to say, well, let's pivot back.
Right.
Well, the whole point of not pivoting quick is it's expensive to do it, and it's even more expensive to pivot back.
Right.
And often it's very reactionary to pivot and pivot back. And whatever audience you lost in the initial pivot, you then have the potential to lose the audience you've developed after the pivot by going back.
Well, and the circumstances are different than they were when you did the first pivot.
That's right. There's that too. So you've adapted, you've adopted, you've possibly pivoted. Your business model probably looks very different today than it did exactly 365 days ago.
Right.
You have a lot of different options. You're doing a lot of things in different ways. So how do you decide? This is not rhetorical. I'm asking Pritch this question. How do you decide what options and changes you keep, what things you can stop doing, and if you should stay here or if you should potentially pivot back? What's the factor? What's the one factor that drives that decision-making process?
It's not fair. You didn't tell me there was going to be a pop quiz.
I didn't tip him off to what this answer is. Sorry, Pritch.
Well, I think as businesses struggled to adapt and adopt, that they learned what worked and didn't work. And if it's working now, there's no reason to change it.
Correct. And it works if your audience responds to it.
Exactly. There we go.
The decision maker in this process of what you keep, what you eliminate, what you can and cannot go back to, how you move forward, and how you grow your business, all of those things are decided upon and told to you, if you pay attention,
Right.
to your audience.
Yep.
As the boss, as the business owner, as the executive in charge, it's not about what you want or what you think.
Right. It's not about you.
It's not. It's
Right.
never been about you.
Never been about you.
It's your audience.
Yep.
The public, the people who buy your product or services, the people who transact with you, they spend their hard-earned money for whatever it is you're offering them. They get to decide what they're willing to spend their money on, how they want the transaction to happen, what their expectations are, and the expectations you have to meet are all set by your audience.
Yep. Absolutely.
So if you're thinking to yourself, man, I'm confused, what to do, what to keep, what to move, don't think about what you want to do.
Right.
And absolutely, positively, and if you do this, you're failing, and I'm going to come through this microphone and get you. Not
Tough talk.
if
It's
you
tough
think,
love.
If you have the attitude of, but that's how we've always done it,
Ooh.
you're failing.
Yep.
Absolutely failing. Again, we said that change is an opportunity, and success comes from the management of change. So why in the hell would you try to go back to what we've always done? That's the opposite of change.
Absolutely. And the circumstances are different now, a year in.
Exactly. That's the change. The circumstances are different. Everything has changed. The idea of going back to what you've always done, because it's comfortable and you feel like you know it, but that's going backwards. And we said earlier, going backwards is failure. So, number one, take the idea of because we've always done it that way, or we liked doing business the way we did, or we were forced out of that by COVID. None of that matters.
Right.
Completely irrelevant because
Right.
your customer, your client doesn't see it that way. All they know is how they do business with you today, whether they appreciate that or not, what they would like and expect from you moving forward. That's all you can focus on. Focusing on the past is failure.
And if you try and go back, circumstances are different. You're going to find it's going to be harder to do the old style than to keep what you adapted to keep your adoption.
Whatever you adopted.
Right, exactly.
And whatever changes to your business model all the way up through a pivot, it is working right now.
So don't fix it if it ain't broke.
And how do you know if it's not broken? The numbers will tell
customers.
you. The audience, the transactions, the numbers.
Yep.
If you're saying to yourself, I want to go back to the way I was doing business because I liked it, or my staff liked it, or it was easier on us, or we didn't have to work weekends or whatever the scenario is, but your numbers tell you this is more effective than the smart fiduciary responsibility as the business decision maker is to keep doing what is working.
Right.
There are things, though, that might stop working. That very possible that you were doing e-commerce or delivery service or third party or a digital product instead of a analog product change in 2020. That if your audience stops responding to it, if they stop purchasing, if they stop asking for it, you can let that go. But not
There you go.
because the first 5 people stopped asking for
Right.
it, or the first 10, or the first 50% of your audience. Literally, you have to get into the 80, 90% range, or only 10% or 5% of our audience is still utilizing this before you should consider dropping it. And when you do drop or change back, if you will, the tools, the training, the processes that you've put into place, you lose that investment over the last year. You've invested time, money,
a lot of time
and
money.
focus.
Yep.
Exactly. You have purchased tools. You have paid vendors to do things. You have made adaptations. You've had trained your staff differently. You've trained your audience differently. You've had to communicate to the people coming to your business or not coming to your business because it's virtual now, or all these things. You've moved everyone, your staff, your audience, and your vendors even, to this new style of business. You made investments, even if it's time and focus. Internal, even if you didn't have a huge outlay of cash, and I think a lot of you did, and a lot of you were at the same time losing money, so it's hard. There was a lot of heartburn to it.
Right.
But you're invested in it in every way. Don't give up on that. Don't go backwards. Don't lose that investment. Even if it feels like you should go back, or the normal, going back to that, the new normal, the air quotes here, the end quote, unquote, normal is irrelevant. How to move forward is all that matters.
Absolutely. It's absolutely true.
So, talking about the new tools, the new processes, the new training, bringing your audience in a different way, this all feeds into the 2 basic ideas behind how a business creates more profitability. 2 ways to do that.
Okay, tell us.
Effectiveness and efficiency.
There you go.
Effectiveness in driving sales.
Right.
Effective marketing, effective sales process, effective conversion, effective transactions equal sales. Driving sales.
Not spending time, effort, or precious resources on somebody who doesn't care.
You have to have sales. The more sales you have, the more opportunity you have to be profitable.
Right.
And we'll get into a few minutes, we'll talk about profit margin. But obviously, you can have a different profit margin when you have high volume sales versus low volume sales.
Yep.
Or predictable sales.
Right.
This is another thing that people miss out on as well. Now, efficiency is the other way. You can keep the price where it's at. You can keep the same number of sales. But if you can lower or reduce your internal cost, if you can replace something expensive with something more efficient, if you can stop doing something that costs you money and do something that costs you less money, or maybe make an upfront investment, a new piece of technology or a new piece of equipment or something of that nature, that is an upfront cost, but then the operation lowers because of how many hours a day you can use the piece of machinery, how much electricity it is, how much speed you can add to your employees because you've upgraded their technology, et cetera, communication, et cetera. All of that goes into efficiency. So you can take the same amount of sales in, same total number of sales and same profit margin per, but if your cost to operate is lower, you keep more money in the bank.
Well, and I immediately thought about Amazon and its packaging and the evolution over the past year or so.
Right.
They're using fewer and fewer cardboard boxes and more plastic bags. And that's efficiency. They're finding efficiencies.
Because ultimately, wood has been hard to source.
Right.
If you try to
Cardboard,
if you try to buy
expensive.
a 2x4 right now, it's very expensive. If you try to build a house right now, it's super expensive. If you try to buy paper right now and cardboard or cardboard boxes, because it all comes from a wood product, because there are less people out in the world cutting down trees and milling them into these products. That's the price across the board on anything that's wood related has gone up.
Absolutely.
And anything that's petroleum based is going to go up too because of the changes in that's a political issue. So we'll get away from that.
Right.
But anytime fuel
Don't
prices
get me
go up,
started.
the fuel byproducts,
Right.
which a lot of petroleum products are byproducts of fuel of manufacturing gasoline, those prices are going to go up as well. So these prices go up, they change, like you said, and so Amazon had to adapt. They had to change some things they were doing, and they were sourcing things. They ultimately had to work through all the cardboard boxes and starting incorporating plastic bags and things of that nature as well.
Seeking efficiency.
That's right. So how do you run your audience? How do you run your business more efficiently? Because you pay attention to the changes you needed to do in order to keep your customer happy and to keep the sales process moving. That's efficiency. That's a focus for you. Driving sales come from the same idea of paying attention to your audience, letting your audience, your consumer, the person who's going to ultimately hand you, just to write you a check, right? Write you a check. Does anyone write checks anymore these days? Even hand you cash, like swipe their card, right? For your product or service, whatever it is. That's driving sales. That's where economics come from. And both of these things are based on audience.
Yes.
Your audience decides.
Absolutely.
The transactions decide, and the numbers will guide you through the process. So when you talk about effectiveness, efficiency, driving more sales or keeping sales the same, but making more because it costs you less, that gets you into the discussion of profit margin. So when COVID-19 broke out, when businesses were super affected early last year, we started telling people, stop worrying about profitability and look at survivability of your business.
Right.
You need to be able, and of course there was 2 weeks to flatten the curve. So we're like, just get through these 2 weeks, you'll be fine. And then just get through this month and then this quarter, and then ultimately was a year. But if your business runs out of money and goes bankrupt, it doesn't matter what your profit margin was at any point in the process.
Right.
If you ran out of money, because sales went down or costs went up.
Right.
And all those things happened. That's why you had to adapt, stop, and pivot during the process. So the idea of I need to make a certain profit margin, and let me back up one bit here because, folks, too many people these days demonize profit.
Oh, yeah.
Profit is essential for business.
Absolutely.
Any business that is still operating today through this last 14 months or so of this COVID scenario, the only reason they survived, it wasn't PPP loans, it wasn't EIDL loans, it wasn't anything like that. They survived because they had profit in the past that was sitting in the bank that they could pull out of the bank and pay their bills with.
Right.
It's that simple.
Yep.
Sometimes it's seasonal, sometimes it's transactional, sometimes it's all kinds of other factors. Some you can control, some you can't. Sales cycles are not consistently the same every day, all day, 365 days of the year.
Right.
To get past low points, valleys in your sales process, you have to have the peaks where you take in more, you keep more, you hold it back so that you can ultimately across the whole year have a steady flow of income.
Right.
You can pay your bills, you can keep people employed, all these things because you have profit when sales are high. It'll allow you to survive when sales are low. Whether it's a seasonal thing with your business or COVID-19 shuts down entire industries at a time. So too many people think a business making profit is somehow cheating the consumer, and it's not. If you're offering a product or service of value, if you're offering value, the consumer understands it, you're not tricking them, you're not lying to them, you're not telling them something that will do or won't do, that's not true. But being honest in your marketing, attracting the right audience, providing them some of the value, they perceive the value to be correct and they pay for it. The transaction happens. They get value. You provide value and you make profit. That is all legitimate business. Too many people look at that as being illegitimate and they're wrong and they should not be in business. They should go do something else.
Right.
So that's my soapbox on profitability.
Most of the folks complaining about it are not actually in business, by the way.
So you have to have profit. It has, and typically when you run a business, depending on your industry and business model, there's sort of norms of the restaurant industry is about a 10 to 12% profit margin. Technology is typically a 50% margin. Other factors, manufacturing, 70, 80% margin. And then a lot of digital products, virtual things like Facebook, they're like a 90% margin, right? So all kinds of different margins, different businesses, depend on your industry, et cetera. A lot of people try to fit into that. Here's, again, how it's always been done. Our industry standard is X on profit margin.
Right.
This last year, you had to really eat that profit margin to stay viable.
Right.
You had to cash flow through. Cash flow was more important in 2020 than profit margin, because paying bills, keeping new fresh product and service coming through, especially if you were in an industry like the food business where if you sit on inventory too long, it literally spoils,
Right.
it dies. The fashion industry has to turn stuff out so often, or it becomes old news. Technology, it changes. It used to be every 18 months. Now it feels like every 6 months. Technology updates itself, and you don't want to be sitting around with last year's flip phone in your warehouse.
They're making a comeback.
I know, right? That's a whole different.
That's a whole different
It's a little
conversation.
silly, I think. But you don't want to be sitting on old stock.
Right.
You don't want spoilage.
Right.
And you need cash flow to keep things current, and then ultimately, depending on some of the past profit, to pay your bills to survive the low time, which for all of us was 2020. So this is a perfect opportunity now, because again, going back to this no new normal, and there's definitely absolutely can't go back to how we've always done it.
Right.
We should really examine your profit margin right now. Is it set properly? Is it set too high or set too low? And again, it depends on your industry and your position in industry. If you're the top end of the industry, the low end, if you're the middle of the pack, which are all good positions to be in. I'm not saying one's better than the other, but your position, your audience, how you market to your audience, and ultimately the price point on your product, which is affected by your profit margin.
Right.
It needs to be collaborative. Your pricing strategy should meet your marketing strategy, which should meet your overall business strategy, depending on your position. So right now, because we're talking about adapt, pivot, you're not going backwards, we're going forward. You've changed a lot of things. You're examining. You're already paying attention to your audience as to what they value, what they want more of, what they don't value, what they want less of. You're making all of these decisions based on your audience. You should also examine right now your profit margin. Is it right, or is it because that's how it's always been done? Have you created efficiencies in your business that maybe you can reduce your profit margin and sell more units per?
Right.
Or have you created more value in your product because you have made these alterations and the audience really respects the expectation you've set and met, that they're willing to pay more for it because it's become something different on the backside, and you can increase your profit margin so you're not leaving money on the table without pricing yourself out. Again, depends on if you're the top end, middle, or the bottom end of the position in your industry.
Right.
It does. I don't have the answer for you, and I don't really care what the answer is. I want you to think about it. I want you to examine all of these aspects. I want you to examine profit margin. I want you to examine the efficiency internally, and I want you to examine the effectiveness of your marketing, your sales, and everything that drives business to you.
Yep.
Those all
Perfect.
three things are cyclical. They work in concert with each other, and all of them right now, as we go back to open business, back to normal, is this exact time to understand what works, what doesn't work, what you need more of, what you need to do less of, and ultimately how you operate your business in 2021, 2022, 2025, 2030, 2050, 2080. This is how we move forward. This is how we get past this terrible year. This is how we rebuild our profits, because we have burned through them because of 2020. And ultimately you come back on the other side of the COVID experience, a better organization than you went in. Otherwise, this year of stress, this year of pullback, this year of failure for some people will be a failure if we don't learn these lessons and come out better on the other side. So no one wants a pandemic. No one wants interruptions to their business, but it does happen. The only way to come out of it better than before is to examine all these things and move forward in a better future way, not a past way.
Absolutely.
There you go.
Don't go charging into change necessarily. Take a look at what worked.
Right.
And now and as you said, examine these things for sure.
You'll understand your cash flow better. You'll understand your profitability better. You'll be better prepared for change in the future. Is that future change could be simply audience attitudes. It could be technology. It could be new competition. It could be another pandemic. I hope not. It could be government changes. There are things mostly out of your control typically, or things that are in your control, but you're always going to be changing your business. Yep. So the lessons of 2020, the lessons of COVID-19, the lessons of effects, the adapt, and pivot, not pivot, but adapt and adopt, you should completely keep going with you in the future. If you get forced to pivot sometime in the future, good luck on that. It's a big deal. Take your time, be slow into it, because you won't have the excuse of because the whole industry went crazy today because of some big government announcement, unless we get a big giant shutdown like that again. You might have to. But don't think about pivoting. Do think about continual adapting and adopting. Managing the change process is where success happens.
Perfect. There it is, sir.
Take those lessons, go long on developing your business. Think about 2021, 2022, all the way through, however long you want this business to exist. Keep these attitudes, and ultimately, no matter what, if you're listening to your audience, you're expecting the change that they'll eventually demand, and you do what your audience asks of you, the potential for you to be successful is way, way up there.
Way, way up there.
There you go.
Cool.
That's our conversation today.
Thanks, sir.
Please leave us some comments if you agree, disagree, if you think we missed something. We love the conversations that we get. Comments, however you found this podcast or video. Hit us up on social media as well. Leave a review. Please subscribe.
Yep.
Share with a friend. Follow us on social media. Interact with us. We love the exchange on social media. And we'll have another episode of the Neo Marketing Podcast in 2 weeks. For that, Kyle Golding, Pritch Pritchard, good luck.
Ciao.
This has been the Golding Group Neo Marketing Podcast. Make sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode. Tell a friend, leave a review, and engage with us on social media. Thanks for listening.